Today's discussion delves into the Supreme Court case, United States v. Skrmetti, a landmark decision with significant implications for transgender rights. It's a complex case, so we'll be breaking down the key arguments and the court's reasoning.
Indeed, the Skrmetti case touches upon fundamental questions of equal protection and the role of the judiciary in navigating complex medical and ethical issues.
The case centers around a Tennessee law restricting sex transition treatments for minors. What were the core arguments presented to the court?
The plaintiffs argued the law violated the Equal Protection Clause, claiming it discriminated based on sex and transgender status, thus warranting heightened scrutiny.
And the state's defense?
Tennessee argued the law didn't trigger heightened scrutiny, meeting the rational basis review standard by prioritizing the health and welfare of minors.
Let's clarify the legal standards. What's the difference between heightened scrutiny and rational basis review?
Heightened scrutiny, typically applied to classifications based on race or sex, requires the state to demonstrate a compelling interest and narrowly tailored means. Rational basis review, the lower standard, only requires a legitimate government interest and a rationally related means.
So the core of the legal battle was whether the Tennessee law should be judged under the stricter heightened scrutiny or the more lenient rational basis review.
Precisely. The court's decision to apply rational basis review was a pivotal point in the case.
The court analyzed the Tennessee law's classifications. What were those classifications and how did the court view them?
The court identified two classifications, one based on age, allowing treatments for adults but not minors, and another based on medical use, permitting treatments for certain conditions but not gender dysphoria. The court deemed both subject to rational basis review.
The plaintiffs argued that the law implicitly relied on sex-based classifications. How did the court address this?
The court rejected this, stating that neither classification explicitly turned on sex. While the law referenced sex, the court held that mere reference isn't sufficient to trigger heightened scrutiny, especially in medical contexts where treatments are often sex-specific.
The dissent disagreed, arguing the law's application did turn on sex. What was their reasoning?
The dissent argued that the law prohibited treatments for minors of one sex while allowing them for the other, creating a de facto sex-based classification. They highlighted the different outcomes for transgender boys and girls seeking hormone treatments.
The court also addressed whether the law classified based on transgender status. What was their conclusion?
The court held it didn't classify based on transgender status, drawing a parallel to Geduldig v. Aiello, which held that excluding pregnancy-related disabilities from insurance coverage wasn't sex discrimination. The court argued SB 1 removed a specific diagnosis, not a group of people, from treatable conditions.
The plaintiffs also invoked Bostock v. Clayton County. How did the court address Bostock's relevance?
The court acknowledged Bostock's holding that firing an employee for being gay or transgender violates Title VII. However, it declined to extend Bostock's reasoning to this equal protection case, arguing that changing a minor's sex or transgender status wouldn't alter the application of SB 1.
The dissent countered that Bostock's but-for causation standard showed sex as a causal factor in SB 1's operation. What was their argument?
The dissent argued that even if other factors were involved, sex was a but-for cause because changing a minor's sex would change the application of the law, illustrating this with examples of different treatments for minors with sex-inconsistent characteristics.
Given the court's application of rational basis review, how did it assess Tennessee's justifications for the law?
The court found Tennessee's justifications sufficient. The state cited concerns about the risks of these treatments, the minor's maturity to understand those risks, potential regret, and the availability of less invasive approaches.
The plaintiffs argued the law's classifications were too broad and not directly related to the state's interests. What was the court's response?
The court rejected this, emphasizing the state's wide discretion in areas of medical uncertainty and declining to second-guess the lines drawn by the law. They cited ongoing debates among medical experts and recent developments questioning the efficacy of these treatments.
The dissenting opinions strongly disagreed with the majority's approach. What were their main points of contention?
The dissenting justices argued that SB 1 clearly classified based on sex and transgender status, requiring intermediate scrutiny. They criticized the majority's interpretation of the law's classifications and its reliance on Geduldig v. Aiello.
The dissent also highlighted the potential harm to transgender minors. How did they frame this?
The dissent emphasized the life-altering and potentially life-saving nature of these treatments for transgender youth, contrasting the state's actions with the consensus of major medical organizations supporting gender-affirming care.
What are the broader implications of this Supreme Court decision?
The decision has significant implications for transgender rights and the future of legal challenges to similar state laws restricting gender-affirming care. It sets a precedent for applying rational basis review in cases involving sex-based classifications in the medical context.
The dissenting opinions expressed concern about the potential for future discrimination. What were their concerns?
The dissenters worried that the decision would embolden states to enact discriminatory laws under the guise of rational basis review, potentially harming vulnerable populations and undermining the Equal Protection Clause.
The concurring opinions discussed the role of expert opinion in shaping legal decisions. What was their perspective?
The concurring justices cautioned against undue deference to expert consensus, particularly in areas of evolving medical science and significant ethical debate. They emphasized the importance of legislative flexibility and the democratic process in resolving such issues.
Justice Thomas's concurrence went further, expressing skepticism about the reliability of some expert opinions in this area. What were his concerns?
Justice Thomas raised concerns about potential biases and insufficient evidence in some expert opinions supporting gender-affirming care, highlighting the need for caution and critical evaluation of expert claims.
The concurring opinions also addressed the issue of informed consent for minors undergoing these treatments. What was their argument?
The concurring justices argued that states have a legitimate interest in questioning whether minors possess the maturity and understanding to provide truly informed consent to irreversible medical procedures. They pointed to the experiences of detransitioners as evidence of potential regret.
The majority's opinion relied heavily on Geduldig v. Aiello. Why is this decision so controversial?
Geduldig's holding that excluding pregnancy-related disabilities from insurance coverage wasn't sex discrimination has been widely criticized as failing to recognize the inherent link between pregnancy and sex. The dissent in Skrmetti argued against extending Geduldig's reasoning beyond its specific context.
The dissenting justices offered a sharp critique of the majority's reasoning. What were their main criticisms?
The dissenters criticized the majority for misinterpreting the Tennessee law, failing to apply intermediate scrutiny, and relying on flawed precedents like Geduldig. They argued the majority's approach undermined the Equal Protection Clause and disregarded the potential harm to transgender minors.
What does this decision mean for future legal challenges to similar laws in other states?
The decision sets a significant precedent, potentially making it more difficult to successfully challenge state laws restricting gender-affirming care for minors. However, the dissenting opinions highlight the ongoing legal and ethical debates surrounding these issues.
So, in essence, the Supreme Court's decision in United States v. Skrmetti represents a significant development in the ongoing legal battle over transgender rights, particularly concerning medical care for minors. The case highlights the complexities of balancing state interests with constitutional protections and the ongoing debates surrounding gender-affirming care.
The decision underscores the need for continued dialogue and further legal challenges to ensure the protection of transgender individuals' rights.
Thank you for this discussion. This conversation is powered by Google Illuminate. Check out illuminate.google.com for more.